What's up? How you doing? It's Jared. I want to talk about Tantos, right? And you may say, oh, this isn't a Tanto, it's an Americanized Tanto. Well, this is the blade shape that everybody thinks of when they hear the term Tanto, right? If you're going to buy a Tanto folding knife, Tanto pocket knife, whatever it's going to be, it's probably going to be this angular blade shape, right? A straight cutting edge with a defined curvature in the, or a defined angle change in the blade. And that is where most people's brains go when you think of Tanto, right? This is an H&K conspiracy right here. And the conspiracy is that this thing weighs almost a pound. It's like 14 ounces. Kind of a pointless knife in itself. I refinished it here. It used to be all black coated, but this is just an excellent example of a Tanto, I think. This is what people think of. All of these knives here are Tantos. This is a Benchmade 583 Barrage, and you can see the difference in this here. A lot of the time what you hear the benefits, people will mention the benefits of a Tanto blade design is ease of penetration, right? It's a great penetrator. And that's true for a couple reasons. But it's not across the board, right? You can't just say because it's a Tanto, it's going to be a good penetrator. That's not accurate. What the Tanto does is it leads you to be able to have a thicker tip, right? Because you can see here on all of these blade designs, the flat section of the blade comes all the way out, right? Comes all the way out because you're not grinding from the spine. Well, you are grinding from the spine, you know what I mean? But you're grinding different angles. You're not grinding that belly in there. You're not putting a full flat grind on a Tanto, generally speaking. And so the flat section of the blade here comes all the way out right next to the tip. And what that does is it leads the thickness of the blade, the actual stock thickness of the blade comes all the way down to that section there. And so you've got a very reinforced, very thick tip. And that's good for stabbing, that's good for penetration because it's not going to break. You can hit it on harder material, you can throw it against something, you can see this here, it's a really thick angle change there. And so it's going to be more robust. It's going to be able to take more of a beating, right? And as well, classic Tantos are very straight line penetrators. This knife here, this H&K, this is a H&K Entourage, right? Let me actually do this. I'm going to take a little piece of paper here, put a dot on it, right? And the spine of the blade is what I want to show mainly with this. But I'm going to put that tip right there on that little dot and pierce through this piece of paper here. You can see the blade is being forced in the direction of the actual cutting angle, right? Of the actual cutting edge. It's being forced this way from the actual entry because there's no cut being made on the spine. There's no cut being made on this side of the blade, right? And so when you have a really heavy curvature, like on this 583 here, this Barrage, when you have that really heavy drop coming down into that secondary cutting edge, the blade has to move further over. You can see how far that blade moves over, right? And so you've actually sacrificed that straight line penetration with this design. This isn't going to penetrate straight. But you come down to something like this here with that flat back and come into material and all of that cutting edge, all of that angle, yeah, some cheesy paper, but all of that cutting edge is going straight in, right? And so it's a straight cut. The only thing that's actually making the cut is this forward edge here, because when you have that top drop, when you have that top, you know, that drop point effect on the Tanto, what that does is it causes you to cut in two directions when you're actually penetrating into material, because you're cutting in this direction here with the blade and you're cutting in the forward direction. That's not the case with the classic Japanese Tanto design. The classic Japanese Tanto, the belly actually comes up to meet the spine of the blade. And so that is why you hear Tantos are such good penetrators, because they're a very straight line penetrator. The blade doesn't have to move over nearly as much as it does with something that is dropped down. And as well, all of the cutting, all of that cutting is being done by the recurve or the curvature in the actual belly. That's not the case with this Americanized Tanto. The Americanized Tanto, all of that forward cutting is being done with the curvature or the angle in this front section of blade here, right? And so you've got a lot of drop with this blade, this design here. You've got a lot of drop and you've got a very small cutting edge up front opposed to something like this H&K here, right? If I can get this all to come back into focus here. And so this H&K is going to be a much easier penetrator. It's going to penetrate into material much easier because you've got a heavier cutting angle leading to a better cutting surface in the front. It's more cutting area in the front, and you've got less drop. You've got less push to the actual side to give that penetration in the actual cut itself, right? And so it's a give and a take. You can't say that Tantos are just good penetrators. They're really not, but it does enable that capability of being a more robust, being a better penetrator. And so you really kind of got to look at it all around. Honestly, when people buy a Tanto blade design, they're not really buying it for that capability. Some people may be, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying nobody buys a Tanto because of the actual attributes that the blade shape brings you. It does have some majorly beneficial attributes. But most people who buy a Tanto, I think, just like the shape. They like that angle. They like the crazy design with the sharp angles. It just looks, it's more of an aggressive blade design. It's more angular. There's more going on there than something like a classic drop point. And so I think that's why most people do gravitate towards these Tanto blades. But with that said, there are some major benefits that you get. When you need a straight edge, right? When you have basically everything, right? This is a 746 in my pocket right here, and you can see the amount of belly that this knife has. But Bob Lum here, it's Bob Lum is the designer, right? Obviously knew what he was doing, and he still included a little bit of flat. There is still a tiny bit of flat right there on that actual cutting edge. It's very rare that you come into a knife that actually has no flat. You can see this here. There's still that little flat section of cutting edge. And the reason for that is when you need a flat cutting edge, a rounded cutting edge won't work. It's the same thing with a rounded cutting edge. You know what I mean? If you're trying to skin game, this Tanto here really isn't going to do the job very well. When this you know, much more belly would do would do much better at that task. It's the same thing when you're cutting. If you're trying to cut something flat, you're trying to cut a surface down to meet another surface. A rounded spine, you just can't get that flat cut. You just can't get that smooth, flattened surface with a rounded cutting edge like you can a straight cutting edge. And so there are some major benefits that come in. Slash cutting. When you're coming in to actually slash into material, you're not delivering more cutting edge onto the actual material itself, whatever you're actually going to be slashing into. Because when you hit something with a belly, right, it's a continuation of material because you're dragging the knife along like this, right? And so it's a continuation of blade into whatever the material is that you're cutting. It's not like that with this straight edge. When you actually come onto a straight edge, come onto a slash cut with a straight edge, it works much more like a hack. It's hitting. You're getting that contact, that force, that pressure smacking in because there's actually no curvature. There's no slicing ability. And so it's not going to slice as deep. You're going to get a better slicing action. You're going to get a deeper cut with something with a belly. But you're not going to be able to hack as well. You're not going to be able to impact cut nearly as well as something with a Tanto. And especially with that secondary edge. Because you can see the amount of surface contact. Come back now. Well, let's switch it up for belly. Start using this one, Benchmade Cotillion, right? The amount of surface area contact that comes down, see my fingers are underneath there, and I'm not even scared of doing this. The amount of surface contact that comes down because of that belly is wide. So when you actually hit something, it doesn't do anything. You can see the amount of damage there. This is a sharp-ass knife. It's the only reason that it was actually able to do that. But when there is that secondary little cutting edge, it's called the rocote, if you're wondering. But if there is that little secondary cutting edge right there, when you actually come down onto material here, let's see if I can get it at a proper angle. You can see that it will actually cut into the material. It penetrates all the way through. And it's because you have so little contact area. All of your force and all of that pressure is being concentrated onto that little secondary cutting edge. And so with impact cutting, the Tanto takes it. Slash cutting, you definitely want something with a belly. So again, it's just a give and a take. It's all across the board. But it's definitely a cool knife design. I definitely, it's not something that I gravitate towards too heavily. I don't, this is honestly my entire Tanto collection right here. If I throw this knife, throw that one in there, this is my entire Tanto collection. It's not something that I heavily gravitate towards, but it's not something that I look away from because there's definitely some attributes to the Tanto knife design that other knives just don't deliver, but at the same time, you are sacrificing some other things. So I really just think it's the cool factor. It's just the factor that it's angular, it's more crazy looking, it's just not as traditional as some of the other more classic folding knife designs. I think that's the main reason that people gravitate towards the Tanto in modern day. Unless you're actually going into service or something. then you probably got a different reason for it. That's it. Y'all have a good one.